What up boys, and welcome back to another video. If you are new around here and do enjoy today's content, then be sure to drop us a subscription. It means a ton. Anyways, in the current meta, Goblin Hut has been running riot. So today, I thought we'd go through 5 ways to counter the current Goblin Hut meta. First up, let's talk about when you can push into a Goblin Hut to kill it. Cheaper win conditions are generally better at this, especially things like Royal Hogs that do relatively well against single targeting units. However, with this being said, you have to consider that your win condition will be lost to this hut and probably won't be getting a ton of damage from this push. Win conditions such as Giant are not good at this, because the Spear Goblins will stack up for a long while and actually give your opponent build up value. This works best in decks with a couple of semi-win conditions, such as in Miner Wall Breakers. You can choose to use the Miner or the Wall Breakers on the hut, then use the other one for tower damage depending on your matchup. With this said, Miner alone would actually be a bad trade onto the Goblin Hut. This makes it feel like spells are sometimes your only option against the Goblin Hut, seeing as it sits on your opponent's side of the board and doesn't engage with your crown towers ever. However, the pretty high HP of this hut means that the majority of spells actually don't do well against it. Using Fireball, you'll take 600 damage from the hut, and in return deal 200 damage and gain 1 elixir. Overall, you gain 1 elixir, but you lose 400 damage, which is a bad trade. Using Lightning, you'll take 400 damage, deal 300 damage, but you'll lose an elixir. So overall, you're spending 1 elixir to take 100 damage. Another bad trade. Rocket makes this even worse, as it doesn't even hit the tower. You're spending 1 extra elixir, and you'll still take 335 damage. Rocket is maybe one of the worst trades against the Goblin Hut. Even things like the aforementioned Miner get negative trades. Using a Miner onto a hut gets your opponent 750 damage. However, you gain 2 elixir. Taking 750 damage for 2 elixir isn't good for you, and such this is also a bad trade. Even adding in a poison onto this won't help. It'll just lose you 2 elixir and get you an even damage trade. The only 2 options that get positive value onto a fresh Goblin Hut are Poison and Earthquake. Poison will give your opponent 186 damage, but you only spent 4 elixir compared to their 5 elixir, so it's a pretty even trade. Earthquake does rather well, giving your opponent 286 damage, but you gain 2 elixir. Earthquake is definitely your best option in a hut meta, and may even get better when we start adding in win conditions. We mentioned slower tanks towards the start of this video and how they don't really work, but actually this can be a viable strategy even with a little bit of support. If you absolutely need to, you can totally whack a golem down and support with an Electro Dragon to neutralize the Goblin Hut's effect, whilst also gaining damage on your opponent's tower. Even a cheaper win condition like Giant can do this too, and even cheaper support like Musketeer can join in on the action as well. Goblin Hut isn't the best defensive building in the game, and so forcing your way through it sometimes actually works, especially if you have the spells to add onto this too. Some of those previously mentioned support cards actually do a decent job against the hut by themselves, and don't necessarily need the tank in front of them. A good example of this is the Musketeer. She'll take no damage from the Spear Goblins and acts as a good counter, but bad examples of support counters certainly do exist. Firecracker is actually one of the worst cards to go 1v1 versus the Spear Goblins, because she'll take 1 spear every time until she eventually dies for 3 elixir. Dark Goblin is a similar story to this, and will die even quicker than the Firecracker. Baby Dragon will also take damage from the Spear Goblins, but this isn't actually a bad counter, seeing as the Baby Dragon has so much HP for just 4 elixir. Electro Wizard is similar as well, however will lose his HP quicker and is more of a questionable choice of a counter. The Flying Machine functions similarly to a Musketeer, taking no damage from the Spear Goblins due to its long range. Cards like Cannon Cart and Executioner fit in the Baby Dragon category. They'll take damage for sure, but their HP is so high that the damage they take doesn't really matter all that much. They just keep tanking it and moving on. Sometimes it can be the appropriate play to just leave a Goblin Hut. Whilst this may be rare in the current meta considering the strength of the card, it can certainly be useful to have knowledge of when you should ditch a hut and focus on your own game plan. A prime example of this would be when you're planning to punish. If they put a 5 elixir Goblin Hut in a place where you can punish past it, you most definitely should focus on that tower damage and deal with the hut at a later point in the game. If you can actually afford to soak the hut's damage, this is even better. This would mainly be when you're running a beatdown deck, where you can afford to take damage on your tower in order to build a bigger push to run over your opponent. If you know you have a significant elixir deficit, you may also want to ignore an opposing Goblin Hut in order to regain your elixir on on your opponent. I guess outside of these game plans and elixir management strategies, the only time you could ignore a hut is if you also have a hut. Setting this up in the opposite lane means that your opponent and you are both going to suffer damage losses if you don't act against it. This evens itself out and allows you to ignore the hut, which is a roundabout way of countering it. Overall, I think the Goblin Hut appears so strong because it's so damn easy to use and offers so much value and versatility. You simply place it down and now it's a defensive and offensive threat that has very minimal counters. On top of this, it acts as poison bait for decks that wish to utilize that function. But yeah, let me know what you think of the Goblin Hut down below in the comments. Is it just an OP product of the meta, or does it actually need a nerf? Just before I end off today, a quick shout out to my Patreons Jacob, Grahalva and Demonetized, but also to my newest Patreon, Mark Littlewood. You guys help this channel run, and if you do want to get involved, then it'll be the second link in the description down below. But yeah boys, I hope you did enjoy today's video, thank you all for watching, and peace.